when they look at the Europeans and the Russians, they do seem, I mean, Vance goes out there and criticizes Europe, not Russia. Um, how do you think Europeans look at that?
Well, so far, I think I agree with Ian, but I think so far any progress that's been made has been by the Trump administration putting pressure on the weaker party, on Zelensky and on Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin is an absolute expert at this. He's an expert. He will never say no. He will say yes, but the nuances need looking at, and he will kind of roll this out. And I think the real question, and it's going to be clear in the next few days, is whether they say, listen, unless you agree to this, we are going to put extra sanctions on, we're going to push up in the pressure. And so far, I have seen very, very little evidence of that. That will be the real test. Meantime, for Putin, time is absolutely on his side. He's essentially pushed the Ukrainians out of Kursk now, that enclave where they took some territory in the hope of using it as a bargaining chip. But I think the other thing that the Trump administration underestimates, and you're right, this has been a good week for Zelensky after the terrible mauling he got in the Oval Office. But he's much more popular at home. We commissioned a poll from Ipsos of Ukrainians, and it showed that 7 out of 10 Ukrainians approve of what he's doing. 8 out of 10 say there should not be an election because there is war, but our polling suggests that if there were an election, he would handily win it. So he is in a he's in a strong position domestically. And I think the Ukrainians have sort of, played a bad hand well in the last week or so. The question now is really, what does the Trump administration do towards Vladimir Putin? I've seen no evidence yet that they're going to go.
Trump is a great unifier. I mean, Mexico, Canada, Europe, Ukraine, not the United States, but other countries are becoming more unified because of Trump.
Let's go through the numbers.
Yeah.
Claudia Sheinbaum,
85%.
85% approval rating. Mark Carney has moved up in the polls where the Liberals were 25 points behind.
Yeah.
They're now ahead. I suspect that all the Europeans who are facing Trump's wrath are all going to rise in the polls. But again, back to this, do you think Europe thinks that Trump is basically, or the Trump administration is pro-Russian? Or is that going to...
Well, some elements are clearly pro-Russian. I don't think you can characterize the entire court, if you will, because I think this is best described as a court rather than an administration. And it's a court where the king, it's not quite clear what the king's position is, but there are definitely some people around President Trump who are very, very skeptical, perhaps because of their sort of culture war origins, of what they see as a kind of effete liberal sort of, liberalism in Europe that is much too progressive, much too woke, much too keen on migration. And you see it from Vice President Vance's speech in Munich. You see lots of elements of this. And for them, Russia under President Putin, weirdly in my view, represents something admirable. He's a kind of strong man who believes in Christian values and is anti-woke. I think to that extent, I think these people are definitely more pro-Putin than they are pro-Europe.
All right, we got to leave it at that. Ian Bremmer, Danny Minton-Betters, pleasure.